Natalie Brunell.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here for the first time at the VRIC.
Really honored to be here. Vancouver's beautiful. My first time. Hope to come back, maybe when it's a little warmer.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday, and I was like, you can't beat a July or August sunny day in Vancouver. I don't think so. Thanks for coming in January. Appreciate it. So, host of the Coin Stories podcast. Maybe for anybody who's not familiar with you and your business, can we just do a quick 30-second intro, how you spend your time and what it is that you do?
Sure. So I'm really focused on Bitcoin education and teaching a very general audience, a lot of retail investors and newcomers, what Bitcoin is and how it fits into the greater macroeconomic and geopolitical picture. I'm really passionate about this because I come from the world of media. So I was a network journalist and investigative reporter for many, many years. And when I studied Bitcoin, which was, I started about 2017 to invest, and then 2019 I started to really hone in and study the network, I realized this is information that everybody needs. Because unfortunately, our school systems, it doesn't matter if you're in Canada, the US, or a developing nation, they don't teach you what you need to know about money and investing and the history of money and the rise and fall of empires from the context of money and currencies and fractional reserve banking and money printing, and that is crucial if you're going to be able to create and build and store wealth for the future.
Okay, I just want to pull on a thread based on what you just said first then. You talked about the lack of education when it comes to basically understanding the world of money. I completely agree. We can go through 18 years of public school education, and we're never taught what credit is, what interest rates are, what a capital gain is, all this stuff. We're spat out into the economy, told to do what we love, so we borrow 100 grand to get a liberal arts degree. It's a horrible decision. And then you end up sitting on a bunch of student loan debt with a degree that doesn't really qualify you for a high-paying job. And you look at individuals that played a different game, a select few, who somehow discovered the language of money and they got ahead. And you see yourself so far behind the monopoly board. And I always make the assumption that a lack of education when it comes to the world of money is the root cause of so much of the civil unrest that we see, because people can't understand why some are so far ahead and some are so far behind. And there's more to it than just the school system. You talk about money expansion and the causes of that. I'm sure we will. But do you see it the same way when you look at cultural division and the inability for us to really have any kind of civil discourse at the root cause is a fundamental misunderstanding about the language of money?
100%, and I think actually because I come from the world of media, it really informed me to this core issue, because every single day I would go out and I would report on the rising cost of living, the rising cost of education, the rising cost of healthcare, more public corruption, more crime, and we never connect the dots to money and the core unit in our system that is so heavily manipulated that it has misallocated capital, and all of our price signals are completely skewed, and so no one is able to really save anymore. I mean, look at just a couple decades ago in the 70s, the American dream was sort of alive and strong, and you could have a nice house on one income. People felt safer, people felt happier, they were healthier, and you look at generation, just a couple, decades out, maybe one generation out, and people feel like they can't afford to have children anymore. They'll never be able to afford a house. Well, what happened? What happened, especially in the West and the greatest nations that represent freedom and democracy and prosperity? Well, the problem is the money. The money is broken. We keep printing more, and the average person is no longer economically empowered. So to your point, it's understandable why they turn to things like populism. They are more and more frustrated because no matter how hard they work, they're working for dollars that are worth less and less. So it's the road to serfdom, and they're feeling like there's no outlet for that. And so some of them, I think, do resort to some of the bad behaviors we're seeing in society today. We're seeing more crime, we're seeing more mental health issues. A lot of that is connected to the fact that people feel like they can't survive. They're struggling to just make ends meet. And I think that also affects your dignity. We all need economic dignity. We need the ability to work and be able to preserve what we work so hard to earn for the future. Otherwise, how can we plan for the future? How can we be long-term thinkers? We turn into short-term thinkers like our politicians, and we start just thinking about our immediate survival and taking out the extra credit card debt because we just need to keep, treading water. And I think that when we return to hard money, we return to the ability to save for the future, that is when human flourishing can once again take hold.
Okay, so yesterday in our speaker hall in the morning, we spent the whole morning talking about the cycle and the stages of empire. And we looked at the American Empire, the existing current world order, and the British, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese beforehand. Dissecting these with the intention of finding those consistent activities and behaviors that are ever present in the emergence of every empire and the decline of every empire. In those declining years, what you always see is money expansion, money printing. We used to dilute the coinage or just print the paper. Now we just add digits, but it's the same game. And that always accelerates during the sunset years. It gets faster and faster and faster. So to your point about the American dream or the Canadian dream being alive only in the 70s, and it no longer seems valid, it's because as we expand the money supply, obviously the currency is worth less. It's less valuable relative to the assets, which just a small percent of the population owns, the real estate, the businesses, all of this. And that gap continues to increase as the money expansion amplifies. Every year we print more, the distance between the currency and the assets increases. So if we couldn't afford the house this year, right, it's even further out of reach next year and further the year after that. So of course, people despair. So my question for you is, if that's the movie that's been on repeat for the last 600 years of just modern empire, but even the Romans diluted their currencies, and it's forever gained, is there a different ending? Because for the first time ever, we're a digital world. We're a technologically connected world, and that is different. I don't know if it's different enough, but what's your take?
Well, that's why I'm so passionate about educating people about Bitcoin, because in a digital world, we need digital money, and we need it to be hard, we need it to be scarce, and we need it to be completely decentralized. And so, to your point, every empire has basically printed its way into decline, and they're going to continue to have to do that because no one has the political will to say, you know what, we actually need to cut all your Medicare, cut all your Social Security, and stop spending. There is no one will even vote for that. I mean, one of the unfortunate things about us as an electorate is we keep voting for more theft in the system. We keep voting for people that are going to spend more and give us handouts that ultimately impoverish one to two generations down the road. And so we need a return to hard money. And that's why I'm so passionate about Bitcoin, because it emerged organically from the market, like I think a good money should. It shouldn't be top down, it should be bottom up. And it is a way for you to store wealth into the future that can never be debased and that can never be captured and can never be inflated or manipulated away. It is backed by 500 exahash of energy, which is basically the equivalent of like 2 US Navies. And so cryptographically, it is the most powerful computer network in the entire world, doing billions upon billions of calculations that your brain can't even fathom to secure this network that is now a monetary version of the internet. I mean, we all use TCP/IP, right? That was the revolution, that was the information network, and we probably did not anticipate how it would transform how we communicate and how we do business, ordering everything online when it started to emerge in the 90s. It's changed all of our lives, and I think people are discounting how much the monetary network of Bitcoin, which is truly decentralized and has no central point of failure, no CEO, no governance risk, how that's going to transform our lives and being able to transfer value, but more importantly, store it for the long term so that, again, we can plan for our futures.
Okay, I want to ask you a big question. So, the 3 red flags we see at the end of the empire, the money expansion, causing civil unrest, but that can maintain for an obscenely long amount of time until the external competitor shows up, right? The other country that's strong enough economically to rise up and challenge the existing world order. And typically that's not one country, it's a syndicate of smaller countries that can park their ideological differences aside to unite against the global superpower. Could that ending be different this time if we are moving towards a decentralized technological age? And does that change the concept of empire? Because right now, if you're just looking at history and trying to project into the future, you might say, well, China's kind of the leader in this fight, and maybe that's where the puck is going next. Is there any reason to think differently about that transition of power this time because of the uptake of an asset like Bitcoin. It's the one stock that the whole world could buy. I mean, that's another way to think about it.
Right, it has the largest addressable market of any other asset. I mean, if you look at the transitions of one empire to another, at the end of the day, it came down to who now has the monopoly on money. So if now, through Bitcoin and through decentralized money, digital money, you can separate the power of money from the state, you now have hope that the individual will actually be more empowered and more sovereign than ever before. Because as an empire declines, it does tend to concentrate and centralize more and more power. And there's this vacuum that can be filled by very gregarious leaders that sometimes lead us, whether you're far left or far right, to a very bad, total control, oppressive environment. And we do not want that, right? We want the average person to have freedom and to be economically empowered to create and to build and to decide their own destinies. We don't want someone telling us what to do or what kind of money to spend. And so I think when we remove that fusion of the monopoly of the state and money, and we actually return the power to the people, that is when I think the most human prosperity can actually happen. And a lot of people have problems with the idea that Bitcoin's digital. All of your money is digital today. I mean, unless you're buying a lot of physical bullion and putting that in a vault, we're all transacting on digital ledgers that are controlled by one entity or another. And today you cannot send a meaningful amount of money anywhere without a third person, a third party involved and taking a cut of it and knowing exactly what you're spending on and surveilling it. So I think the more that we return the power and freedom to the individual, the better off we will all be.
Okay, I want to give you the opportunity to take me to Bitcoin Church here. So I'm going to be honest. I started buying Bitcoin for the reason I just shared. I looked at this as the one stock that the whole world could buy. And I'm like, yeah, I know where this story goes. Like, so that's why I started buying Bitcoin strictly as a speculator. So today though, if I'm still buying it now, it's because I'm making a bet on demographics. If I look at the split in individuals who own Bitcoin and don't, and I'm going to super generalize, we could probably just pick an age and say above this age they don't own much, below this age they own most of it, right? And so as a consequence, I've got 3 young kids, right? They're 3, 5, and 7. They're truly digital natives. They will never know any other world. They're not going to have any insecurity about digital money. It's the only money they're ever going to know. And that's when I say I'm betting on demographics. But betting is the key word, right? So I'm still an investor in this asset because I think there's upside, right? So you're deeper into this than I am from a philosophical standpoint. The future of money, the decentralized system that the world could transition to. I'm still looking at this from an investment standpoint. So walk me through what else I could be missing when I'm looking at this asset.
So I see Bitcoin as the greatest savings tool, the greatest savings technology that has ever been engineered. I mean, it is the hardest form of money. It will actually be harder than gold as of this halving. And it is the best performing asset of the last decade since its creation. It's now only 15 years old, and here we are with the ETFs, BlackRock and Wall Street finally coming in. I always take it back to the basics of just savings, capitalism. The ability to acquire capital so that you can then invest it in the future and drop your time preference so that you can plan, again, long term. We have turned into a very short-term thinking world, not just us in the US, all around the world. We have to think about our basic needs and survival. And we're not able to effectively store wealth in a place that doesn't have a lot of risk. I mean, people have been pushed into investing and, we've made it passive, right? The S&P 500, close your eyes, you'll make 7% every year. Well, how much is the money supply going up? What is the rate of inflation of the actual units in the system? Because are you just tracking inflation or are you actually making gains? Because with Bitcoin, yes, it's volatile in the short term, but over the long run, zoom out and you've made a lot of money. And so I think that it's that long-term strategy, again, of being able to take your wealth, and it doesn't matter where you live, right? Today you can live in Canada but be paid out of France or Japan. Well, you can now put your wealth into cyberspace in this fortress that's protected by a wall of energy so that you can actually store your value as opposed to having it eroded away or taking risks by picking stocks or choosing these crazy tokens that are in existence today. I mean, it's literally betting on a protocol akin to the internet, but for the entire globe. It's accessible to 8 billion people to finally have property rights in the form of hard money.
Okay, so a couple questions I want to spin out of that. So relative to gold, because this is a resource investment conference, when it comes to retaining your purchasing power, I could say that an ounce of gold in 1920 bought you a luxury suit, and an ounce of gold today buys you a luxury suit. And that lack of volatility is the appeal to me from that philosophical standpoint that you were just talking about. And by the way, on the inflation, that you mentioned, you can park your cash in the S&P, and maybe you're beating inflation. Really key angle to inflation that people don't think about is that technology is inherently deflationary. Think about any industry that's been digitized, we pay less for that stuff. Think about music and media and movies. We pay way less than we did in the 90s because it's in abundance, because it's been digitized. And as we digitize more and more of the world, in theory, the price of all that stuff should come down, which allows the issuing party of the currency to inflate that differential. So if we're deflating costs at 4%, then we can inflate the money supply at 6%. But we only realize on paper a 2% inflation rate. Does that make sense? And so the inflation rate is a lot higher than what's reported, and that's why 7% in the S&P may not be what you need, right? Okay, so walk me through, because the biggest pushback that I will get, and that I still have trouble wrapping my mind around, Natalie, from a safe haven standpoint, is the volatility, right? Bitcoin is crazy volatile. I love it as an investor. I mean, that's why I'm there. Like I said, I'm betting on every new generation adopting this asset or something similar. So it's a bet on demographics. But how do you stomach and process the volatility versus the boring rock, which does what a boring rock does, which is nothing, which is what a safe haven is supposed to do?
Sure, I understand. And by the way, I am not opposed to gold. I know there are some very toxic...
Sorry, I didn't, and I absolutely did not mean to make it a gold versus Bitcoin, because that drives me crazy.
I think it's accretive. I think everyone who loves gold will actually come to very much love Bitcoin, because I think it has more properties that fulfill the ideal properties of money than gold. But I will say, in terms of the volatility, there's a saying in our space that volatility is vitality. Again, it has outperformed gold over the last decade, certainly. And the risk-adjusted returns have been more attractive than pretty much any other asset. So even taking a small allocation has allowed people to see massive gains in their traditional portfolios. I actually had Preston Pish on my show recently. I'm going to publish the episode this week, and he pulled four-year cycles of comparing a portfolio that's 98% cash and 2% Bitcoin. 98% cash, right? Cash is trash, you don't want it. 98% cash, 2% Bitcoin versus the S&P 500, and guess which one won? The Bitcoin, the 98% cash, 2% Bitcoin. And so, yes, you have more volatility, but that doesn't, I'm not telling people that they have to go 50%, 90% in their portfolios, especially not when you're first starting. Just a small allocation will be that nice hedge to all the volatility that I actually see in everything else that's going on in the other asset classes. We touched on this a little bit in the panel yesterday, but I mean, the unthinkable has happened. What was once the risk-free asset, the treasuries, Western sovereign debt, now carries more and more risk. Credit risk, that we're gonna potentially default, or inflation risk, duration risk, which is debasement, because that's what they're ultimately gonna do. Hard landing, soft landing in the short term, you know they're gonna have to print. So you want to own something scarce and hard. So when you're looking at volatility, you're probably looking at a chart that's very short term. And when you zoom out, you see Bitcoin going up and the purchasing power of the dollar crashing.
Okay, so thank you for that and brilliant description. And I am one of those individuals who has a bunch of gold bars hidden away. I'm kind of caveman. I like my gold, my steak, my push-ups. But I also own a lot of Bitcoin. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation here is because of how much these two assets are debated as if they're two different sports teams, and that's ridiculous. If you treat an asset like a sports team, you're the one who's going to get whacked, because you can love that asset as much as you want. It's never going to love you back. I guarantee it. Now, the argument to turn your attention that direction, if you haven't yet, is just that we digitize everything, and eventually the currency will be digitized too. And the only way you get blindsided by emerging technology is by not participating in it, right? So I'm an author, I have a podcast and a YouTube channel, and people tell me all the time right now, haven't you realized that AI is going to take out your business model? And I'm like, AI replaced 2 of my employees. It's the most valuable tool I've recognized in the last 5 years. Like, it's not going to wipe me out, it's amplifying what I do. And that's what technology does if you use it. But if you turn your back to it, that's when you get whacked and blindsided. Anything to bolt onto that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people are resistant to new technologies, disruptive technologies, especially if you're incentivized to want the old system to work, because maybe that's the one you work in, right? The Kodak people didn't see Instagram coming, the Blockbuster people didn't see Netflix coming. And so I just urge people to open their eyes, because to your point, everything is going digital. And in the same way that MP3s dematerialized music and Amazon dematerialized books, we're going to dematerialize property, and in a way, gold. I mean, a lot of people call Bitcoin digital gold. It has the same amazing properties that so many people here appreciate gold for, being hard money and sound money to last a generation. And while gold is organically, thermodynamically sound, and you can trust it, to survive 1,000 years, Bitcoin is synthetically, thermodynamically sound through energy and through cryptography. And that is the future. And it's amazing that we have this network that is impervious to any hack, to any corruption, and we should build on top of it as much as we can.
All right, I want to thank you for joining me up here today, Natalie. It's been great having you at the show.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.